Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and this week, I'm continuing my examination of all of the televised works of Stephen King that I never got around to on that initial journey throughout the podcast. And so, what I'm going to be doing today is continuing the conversation around Mr. Mercedes, the television show that I began with my review of the first season of Mr. Mercedes. But then I never got around to the second season, and I never got around to the third season. So what this episode is, it is the first half of the second season of Mr. Mercedes, and then next week's episode will be the second half of the second season of Mr. Mercedes, and then I will do the same for season 3 of Mr. Mercedes. So that's what to expect for this week. And I just wanted to thank everyone for tuning back into the Stephen King Cast. Whether you are a new listener, welcome. Thank you for deciding to check out the Stephen King Cast. Or you are a longtime listener. Thank you for swinging by and for taking time out of your lives to spend some time with me ramble on about Stephen King. If you are new the first time around, thank you for checking this out. Welcome. This is a Stephen King podcast that's been around since 2014. The original mission statement was to make my way through the chronological order of Stephen King to discuss the novels and many movies or television shows based on his works until I finally finished it, and then I was able to, get around to doing some top 10 lists and just keeping up to date with all things Stephen King as they came out. And this past January, I dove back into the Stephen King Cast. I did some audio cleanup, and I made sure that everything was as I promised it to be in the chronological order of publication. And what I've been doing since then, I have been going back and reviewing the things I never got around to on my first go around in terms of his televised works. So this has been a lot of fun, and today it takes us to the second season of Mr. Mercedes. So if you are longtime listeners, you'll know that I have really struggled with Mr. Mercedes. I have struggled with the novel Mr. Mercedes. It's not one of my favorite things that Stephen King has written. I think that it is a deeply flawed novel that doesn't meet the criteria of it being a successful crime novel. It's not a successful detective novel. And as we have seen most recently with Never Flinch, the Holly Gibney novel, there are some habits that he has built for himself when writing these crime stories that don't make it for enjoyable reads if you are looking for a protagonist who impacts the plot or a detective whose detective skills are shown to have a consequential impact on the case, so to speak. And I really struggled with that with Mr. Mercedes. And I enjoyed Finders Keepers, the sequel, and I enjoyed End of Watch as a concept, the novel. But I was never able to get the bad taste of Mr. Mercedes out of my mouth when discussing Bill Hodges as a character, which made the show brought to us by David E. Kelley such a revelation. There is something to be said, and I think that I said it during the time of my original review of Mr. Mercedes, the television show, that first season. There's really something to be said about just a quality television show. I wouldn't consider this, prestige television. It's not the best thing that you're going to see. I wouldn't compare it with, in the same breath as The Wire or Game of Thrones or The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. But there is such a steady hand behind the wheel of this show. It looks great. It knows how to tell a story. It knows how to give our actors something to do. It knows how to keep the characters moving forward without them staying stagnant. It's a solid show. And as someone that grew up in the 80s and 90s, David E. Kelley was someone that, was putting out constant, meaningful television, whether it was Picket Fences, a show that I absolutely adored. And there's a lot of Venn diagram between Picket Fences and Stephen King. The idea of a small town and following our characters in a small town. You can probably understand why someone who liked Stephen King would gravitate towards something like Picket Fences. So that's where I first found David E. Kelley. And from there, shows like The Practice and Boston Legal, these are shows that I stayed, up to date with. And I didn't watch Ally McBeal, but there's no denying the significant cultural impact that it has. So, I mean, this is no slouch of a television creator. He's a heavy hitter. And it's really too bad that Mr. Mercedes, this television show, didn't make more of a cultural impact as I feel it should have. It is worthy of praise. It is incredibly well done, and it is anchored by an incredible performance by Brendan Gleason, who is just, there's something about the way he wears the weight of his body to imbue the character of Bill Hodges with remorse and exhaustion and a dogged determination that continues to drive him even past retirement, and he just can't give up. And he's tired, and he's lovable, and he's gruff, and he's flawed, and he's all of these things. And it wouldn't work if it wasn't for Brendan Gleason. It's an incredible performance that isn't talked about, which is a real shame. And so I'm very happy to be able to talk about this show. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break down the first 5 episodes of this 10-episode second season in this episode, and then next episode I will do the remaining 5 episodes before moving on to the third season. So let me pick up with episode 1. I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary, then give my thoughts. Felix Babineau, the neurosurgeon that saved Brady's life, starts to inject him with an experimental Chinese drug provided by his wife, Cora, the head of marketing at a pharmaceutical corporation, as part of a trial. Over the course of a year, Hodges' visits to Brady have become less frequent as he focuses more on his private investigator business, Finders Keepers, that he runs with Holly. Dixon suffers a fatal heart attack after helping Hodges rebuild his neighbor Ida Silver's gazebo, and Hodges has a nightmare about Brady waking up and rising from Dixon's empty grave. With pressure mounting from both Cora and the threat of investigation if Brady dies, Babineau ups the dosage of Brady's drug. Hodges visits Brady and briefly considers killing him, but leaves before Brady's eyes start to move. Brady awakens in his basement, now full of objects that represent the most important aspects of his life, and attempts to turn his computers on. So this episode, here are my thoughts. It picks up immediately where we have left off, with Brady and Bill both being taken to the hospital for their respective injuries. We have a quiet, slow, and gnarly-looking brain surgery operation on Brady. And here we meet Felix Babineau and his wife Cora, who is a show invention. And through her, we get the experimental drug, which is also a show invention as far as I can remember, to give a quasi-scientific explanation for the mental powers that Brady will acquire. We then get the credits, which I loved. It's a montage of time passing. It tells a story, which involves Bill recovering, exercising, and constantly visiting Brady's hospital room, waiting for the moment when Brady reveals some sort of brain activity. This patience from the from the hero waiting for the villain to reveal himself. This Joker, Batman, Superman, Lex Luthor draw towards one another is deftly done here, and the montage of the time passing with the music is just it's very, very well done. We then check back in with Holly as she makes her way to Finders Keepers, the private investigation firm, and struggles with the disappointment and unexpected delivery of an incorrect shipment of pens. She does some breathing exercises and informs her mother, who calls not to call the agency to bother her. Meanwhile, at the airport, Bill stops, or at least attempts to stop, a con man plane thief and is stopped himself by airport security. This is a good scene. It's effective to show Bill being good at his job, commanding, intimidating. But it's also funny with him telling the security officer that he won't get on his knees because they're good pants. This is why we love Bill. He understands the job that he's doing. He's a veteran cop. He knows the ins and the outs. He knows how to speak to law enforcement and law enforcement adjacent people. Again, I am struck every time I see Brendan Gleason by how much I hadn't liked Bill in the novels, especially in that first book. But I have come around to Bill the character in the books, not so much because of his work in the in the novels, in the 3 stories, but really because of Brendan Gleason. He has changed how I view the character, and it's hard for me not to envision Brendan Gleason as the character when thinking about overall what Bill Hodges is. This is the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm grateful for it. This is also a show that allows itself to take its time and to let the characters bask in the moment with each other. Like Pete and Bill rebuilding Ida's gazebo. Moments like this, they don't propel the overall plot forward, but they allow us to get an idea of their friendship and their outlook on life. And their easygoing relationship needs to be established in order for the tragedy of Pete's sudden heart attack to land. Watching the scene play out with them in the backyard talking about retirement, you should be able to see that coming. The exact conversation has been parodied in movies for years. I always think about McBain from The Simpsons, and this is now the second episode in a row where I'm talking about The Simpsons and his partner 2 days away from retirement with little Susie about to graduate, and he and his wife about to sail around on their newly christened boat, the Live Forever. With that being said, I didn't expect this. Pete doesn't die in the books, and I was genuinely shocked and sad to see it happen. Also, going back to the breathing room on this show, this death allows Ida and Bill to have a dinner table conversation about living life and what it means. And from a plot perspective, it forces Bill to learn to coexist with the people who are still with them and care for him. For instance, Holly, who has moved herself in while rattling off the scientific reasons why being alone after a traumatic event, especially around the holidays, is detrimental to one's health. It's a wonderful balance between propelling the plot forward, which we will get to. And there's a lot of plot. Actually, this season doesn't have a lot of plot. It's a pretty singular story. But it moves at the right pace. And that right pace allows us to spend time with our characters, not as plot devices, not as ciphers, but as actual people who are dealing with the events of each moment along the journey throughout the story as people, and not just barreling towards the next thing because the script is telling them that that's where they need to go. At the eulogy for Pete, he tells the story of the time he put Pete up to arresting a mime, leading to the punchline, "You have the right to remain silent." Again, this is not needed, but it is so appreciated. Not only does it let us see how Bill wrestles with presiding over his friend's funeral, setting the tone and being the leader, commemorating him, honoring him, poking at him and keeping alive the relationship even if one of them is dead. But it also lets Brendan Gleason cook. After the funeral, Bill catches up with his ex-wife, played by Nancy Travis, who we have recently seen in a Stephen King adaptation with Rose Red. I had never seen Rose Red before and hadn't expected to see Nancy Travis on my screen, and it was great for her to show up, and I didn't expect her to, I forgot that she was a part of this. So it was great to see her show back up in the world of Stephen King and Mr. Mercedes by playing Bill's ex. In the aftermath of the funeral, Bill cleans up his kitchen. It's a somber sequence. Not much happens. It just shows how alone Bill truly is. Sitting there eating his ice cream, holding the picture of his dead friend and partner in his hand. But he's not alone, because Holly is there, just out of focus, a gentle reminder that he still has someone. This is a spoiler alert for events still to come, at least in the novels. I don't know how it all ends in season 3 of Mr. Mercedes, but in the final book of the series, End of Watch, again, spoiler alert, Bill dies. To have the show give Brendan Gleason these moments to dwell in his own mortality, it gives the show a lot of weight. And Gleason is more than up to the challenge of conveying a man grappling with the presence of death, and he does so masterfully without saying a word. It's the gift that Gleason is able to give, these hangdog eyes, the weight of his shoulders. He tells so much with his body, but never in a showy way. It's quiet, yet somehow it's deafening with his performance. Elsewhere, Felix is seduced by his wife into doing bad things, and pushing her experiments on Brady. Bill then has a dream sequence in which he's talking to Brady, the white-clad devil on his shoulder at the gravesite of Pete. There's the premonition of Brady resurrection, and the dream prompts Bill to visit Brady at the hospital and wrestles with the decision whether or not he should pull out his breathing tube. He doesn't have it in him, and he walks away, a decision that he will no doubt later regret, and a decision that we will see later on in the show have ramifications that aren't really expected at this moment of viewing. Episode 2. Hodges becomes disillusioned with his work after a couple of jobs that put down desperate, disadvantaged people. His ex-wife, Donna, with whom he is talking again, as well as Allie, advises him that his line of work may not be right for him. Brady's epileptic nurse, Sadie McDonald, is prone to fits of catatonia when she stares too intensely at screens. She lapses into one of these when she stares at Brady's monitor, and he briefly enters her perspective. Sadie reports that Brady is looking at her to Babineau, who orders her not to tell anybody. But she ends up telling her friend and fellow nurse Maggie Wilmer, who spreads it around. District Attorney Antonio Montez, eager to prosecute Brady, hears of this and visits his room, trying to elicit a reaction by causing him pain, but Brady only moves his eyes when he leaves. He again enters Sadie when she has another fit, making her walk around and notice Hodges, having come to visit Brady after hearing the rumors. Brady makes her get a scalpel to kill Hodges with, but he is unwittingly saved by Wilmer, and Brady is ejected from Sadie's head. So here are my thoughts. We get to see Bill in action, taking on a repossession job and repossessing a car from a young mother on a way to a job interview. And again, the opening credits, these are really well done. These are great. They're great opening credits. It's a character-based montage of Bill returning to Brady's hospital room every day over the length of a season. It's simple enough, but it's effective. Different lighting, different outfits each day, the length of Brady's hair, the leaves on the trees, the falling leaves, the bare trees, the snow, the blossom of spring. It's really well done. These are good credits that tell a story, and the passage of time and the patient determination that Bill has to wait out his comatose enemy, his arch enemy. It looks like the show is going to rope Ida into the larger plot of End of Watch, as she is the school teacher whose class unpacks the tablets that will play a larger role in the rest of the season as Brady comes to. At the hospital, From within a mental mind palace designed to look like his basement, Brady watches his nurse Sadie give him a sponge bath. Sadie blanks out for a moment, allowing Brady to momentarily take over and look at himself. When she comes to, she gets the sense that something has happened, but doesn't know what it was, but still is nevertheless understandably freaked out. She argues to the doctors that she saw evidence of consciousness, and Felix starts to explore this, shining a light into his eyes to see if there's a reaction. The show does a clever thing by showing us this perspective in Brady's mind palace. In the basement, he tries to cover up the basement windows to block the light and hides himself under a blanket so that he won't be seen. It's a really clever visualization of Brady blocking his consciousness from the doctors. And again, you gotta give David E. Kelley a lot of credit here. And you know what? I've been talking about David E. Kelley, which I should, because he deserves a lot of credit. But I haven't been talking about Jack Bender. And I should be talking about Jack Bender. I remember if you listened to my first season review of Miss Mercedes, I talked about Jack Bender and the success of Jack Bender as a director and the impact that he had on the show Lost and the show From that just wrapped up its fourth and final season, and Jack Bender is one of the creatives over there. So, I mean, Jack Bender is an amazing television director and storyteller, and it's moments like this, being able to see what this visualization of Brady hiding his consciousness by blocking the windows in his basement in his mind, it tells the story so very clearly. While Brady grows accustomed to his new circumstances, Bill tracks down a father who has taken his children and is fleeing the courts. He uses his detective skills for something other than repossessing and whittles down the locations that the father would take the kids, discovering him at a local campground. It's an interesting moment, with Bill putting his humanity over the job and letting the man go. Bill meets up with Donna, his ex, and it's a thoughtful conversation, again about living life and having meaning. They discuss Bill's unmooring from having any purpose and his current struggles. On top of it, there's the conflict at the heart of Bill's lack of purpose. When he had Brady to give him purpose, it led him to having a heart attack. It wasn't healthy, but at least Bill felt that he had worth. Now, without Brady, he feels a deep lack of purpose. It's a great struggle at the crux of our main character. And feeling nostalgic, he reaches out for Nancy Travis, but he's misread the situation, and he just can't help but feel for Bill. District Attorney Montez aggressively pushes his way past others into Brady's room and intimidates the doctors into investigating the situation in the hopes that he can prosecute Brady, and begins torturing the paralyzed Brady in the hopes that he can break through any facade that Brady might be putting up. Back at the hospital, Brady takes over Sadie's body and uses it to violate herself. It's a disturbing sequence that shows Brady's depravity. Meanwhile, Jerome returns to the story, and we get some moments between he and Barbara, and Brady and Holly arrive to celebrate his homecoming. It's a nice little scene with the small moments that show the relationships. Bill is genuinely smiling for the first time this season, illuminating the importance of Jerome in his life. To the congratulatory handshake to Jerome's dad, to Holly and Jerome catching up and laughing at the cake that Bill bought. After the party, Jerome uses his computer wizardry to doctor his GPA. If this occurred in the book, I don't remember. I don't believe it did. And it's an interesting wrinkle to Jerome as a character. On one hand, it makes the character a little stickier, which allows for some more dramatic tension. It opens up more room for storytelling and avenues to explore. On the other hand, I am not entirely comfortable with a storyline involving a young black male needing to falsify his GPA to feel successful at an Ivy League school. So I'll keep an open mind if this is explored in depth. If it's tackled head on, and the theme of race, belonging, representation, imposter syndrome are addressed, I'll be open to it. But if this is added without thinking this through, it's a dicey position that they've put themselves in. Bill receives a phone call from the hospital with word that Brady is awake. When Bill arrives at the hospital, Brady, in control of Sadie's body, watches his nemesis walk by and begins to stalk him. Bill comes within seconds of dying and would have been a perfect kill for Brady, using someone else's body to commit the murder, keeping him clear. However, he's interrupted and Brady loses possession of Sadie. Episode 3 from Wikipedia. Hodges finds the scalpel in Brady's room, although Wilmer insists Sadie would not hurt anyone. Hodges visits Donna, disturbed by the idea that Sadie tried to kill him and Brady may have woken up, and they spend the night together. She advises him to stay away from the hospital. After Brady learns that Sadie is applying for a transfer, he tries to make her overdose an elderly patient on morphine, but Wilmer catches her and contacts Hodges. As Brady tries to get Sadie to run over Wilmer with her car, Hodges confronts her and stops her. Realizing that she's a liability, Brady makes her go up to the roof of the hospital and jump. Thoughts. We begin with a morning routine of our Batman and our Joker in their morning routines. An opening montage of Batman and Joker, Bill and Brady in their morning routines. Back at the hospital, Bill follows up on what had occurred the previous night, with the feeling that he had gotten from Sadie, and trusts his survival instincts that something had been wrong, that he had been in danger the night before. To lend credence to his argument, he finds the scalpel on the ground that she, with Brady in charge, would have used to kill him. Back at Finders Keepers, Bill and Holly get into an argument about the types of jobs that Bill has been taking on, and again, the larger conversation about worth and purpose come to the forefront. It's not a pointless scene, and it reveals how they interact with each other, that Holly is comfortable with Bill and the level of emotions that he projects. She is able to stand up to him, to acknowledge what he's saying, and is able to put forward her own argument, that she is a partner in his company, in this company, and deserves the respect that comes with it. In essence, Holly is trying to get the PI firm up off the ground and is frustrated that Bill isn't following through on his end. Conversely, Bill is frustrated at the cases that she's having him take on and needs something with larger purpose. Both are right, and neither are wrong. And it naturally allows the larger themes to be worked in through the story through character conflict. Bill takes Holly with him to Sadie's house as a stakeout. It's a fun scene, with Bill using the PI cop terminology that Holly doesn't know. They follow, and Holly is tasked with following the car while Bill follows up with the shop that Sadie had just exited. When Bill returns to the office, he finds Jerome keeping Holly company and helping out. They learn that Sadie is an epileptic and continue staking out Sadie. It's cute seeing Bill teach Holly how to be a private investigator. Knowing the trajectory of the character, seeing this tutelage in action is meaningful. And when Bill tells her that she needs to learn this in case he's sick or out of action, it's foreshadowing to his ultimate fate. Later, Bill meets back up with his ex, and they slowly start to work to, if not reconciliation, then finding comfort in the familiarity that comes with truly knowing somebody. Lou, meanwhile, remember Lou? From season 1, Brady's fellow employee and closest thing to a friend, has just gotten a tattoo. In a conversation with her girlfriend, we see that she's struggling in the aftermath of the events of the first season. She stopped going to therapy and expresses the need to see Brady to confront him, to demonstrate her defiance that she has survived despite his attempts. At the therapist's office, David Kelly is able to naturally remind audiences what happened in season 1 with Brady having stabbed Lou repeatedly. When Brady next takes command of Sadie, he is far more aggressive and lets his personality come to the forefront. He's antagonistic towards Bill and attempts to murder some patients through some medicinal overdoses and ultimately forces her to commit suicide. Episode 4. In the wake of Sadie's death, Babineau warns Wilmer not to tell Hodges about Brady's experimental treatment. Hodges insists to Montez that Brady is secretly conscious, but is told to stop visiting him. He gets Sadie's phone from her mother, which he has Jerome open, and finds that he tried to tell her boyfriend about Brady's control over her. Lou's girlfriend moves out after her unwillingness to proceed to process the severe trauma of her stabbing and how this begins to affect her relationship. She picks up a woman at a lesbian bar but is arrested after she assaults a man who harasses him, being bailed out by her girlfriend who leaves her. Brady takes control of Al Jerzak, a volunteer who passes out books to patients after he loses focus while playing a game on a tablet. He makes him deface the memorial for the Mercedes massacre and to drive out in front of Hodges' house, as inside, Hodges realizes that Brady likely forced Sadie to kill herself, even if he doesn't know how that happened. Thoughts? At the crime scene of Sadie's death, Bill runs into D.A. Montez, and they discuss Brady. While Bill tries to put the pieces together and prove his hunch that Brady is secretly conscious, Brady, in his mindscape, begins to train himself and strengthen his mind. Back at Finders Keepers, Sadie's mom arrives and confronts Bill with suspicion, demanding to know why he'd been at her house the night before, the night that Sadie killed herself. Sadie's mom doesn't believe that it was suicide, and the behavior that Bill describes to her doesn't indicate the typical behavior of her deceased daughter. Later that evening, D.A. Montez follows up with Bill to see what Bill thinks is occurring. He respectfully criticizes Bill for holding back during last year's investigation of Brady. Things are going well until Montez finds Bill's yarn wall and calls him out for being obsessed and holding back. Bill loses it on him for the violation of privacy and admits that he thinks that Brady has more cognition in his brain than is letting on. He thinks he's found a way to communicate with Sadie and is faking the coma. In the hospital, as orderly Al sits in Brady's room and plays on the tablet that had recently been handing out to school children, Brady finds a way into Al's mind. After Lou's girlfriend leaves her due to Lou's unwillingness to get help, she continues her self-destructive behavior at a local bar. On the way back to Lou's place, she and her hookup are confronted by a homophobic bigot, and Lou lets out some bottled-up rage. I know that's supposed to demonstrate that she's not well and isn't dealing with things properly, but I don't know. I just think that we need to see more of this in the world. This not putting up with this bigotry. Anyway, in Ida's backyard, Holly and Ida have a conversation about Holly's fears, her insecurities, and her concern for Bill's obsession with Brady. Ida doesn't understand half of what she's talking about, but it's still fun to see these characters bouncing off of each other. Ida's more direct personality clashing with Holly's hyper-fixated, logic-based approach to life. She gives her good advice. I'm not a big fan of dependence, so I don't want you to depend on Bill. But at the same time, you can count on him. That is a great line. But Holly, not one for non-pragmatic thinking. She doesn't quite understand it. Meanwhile, Jerome explains to Bill the intricacies of hacking Sadie's phone. As soon as they're in, the text messages between Sadie and her fiancé, Matthew, confirm Bill's suspicion that Brady was able to communicate with Sadie. This is a slower episode that doesn't move things forward too quickly. It deals mostly with the aftermath of Sadie's death, others' awareness of Bill's obsessions, and Brady's growing control of others. Okay, episode 5, and this will be the last episode before closing out this podcast episode, and then the episodes 6 through 10 will be covered next week. From Wikipedia, Montez notes that despite Brady's increased brain activity, he is not waking up, threatening to pull his life support from Babineau and allow him to be investigated if he does not show any progress. Cora gives Babineau an experimental variant of the drug to use. Jerome hacks into the hospital's files on Brady to prove to Hodges that he is not conscious, but this only spurs him into getting Wilmer to try to steal from Babineau's office. She gets caught, and Montez warns him not to go back to the hospital or he will have his license for Finders Keepers pulled. Brady has Al kill Montez's dog, break into his house, and steal his gun. Montez meets with Hodges and reveals that Al wrote a phrase on his patio with his dog's blood that he used while hurting Brady, offering to lay off him if he figures out who killed his dog. Thoughts? Hey, fun fact, this episode was directed by RoboCop himself, Peter Weller. Bill and Jerome bat around the possibility of the fallout from unlocking Sadie's phone and discuss the nature of suicide, with Jerome advocating that those truly suicidal don't walk around with a big sign advertising it, and that a mask of happiness may be what people see on the surface, leading to the acknowledgement of Jerome's own mother's suicide 5 years prior. Using Al as a vessel, Brady stalks Bill and then creepily stalks Barbara and her friend Grace. On a date, Holly learns a little bit more about the possibility that there's credence to Bill's theories through a discussion of quantum entanglement, and that there's precedence for this type of thinking. Bill heads to the hospital to talk with Nurse Wilmer about Sadie leading up to her death and asking her for help in obtaining any information assisting him without Dr. Babinaw learning about it. She immediately gets caught by Babinaw, and Bill is then confronted with an irate Montez. Bill is completely unfazed and doesn't back down from Montez's threats. Brady uses Al to kill Montez's dog while Lou rages in the bathroom, pretending to yell at Brady. Between last week's episode and this is the first time the show has started to feel like a little bit of wheel spinning. Montez returns home to find his dead dog. He's been acting like a real prick, an unlikable character, but the dog doesn't deserve to die. Back in the hospital, Felix speaks to Brady, letting him know that based on the brain patterns that he's been seeing, Brady was never in control of his murderous actions. He wants Brady to work alongside him in exchange. He'll do anything that he can to get him to a psychiatric hospital instead of a prison. Bill and Donna have a conversation, and she warns him that he's dragging Jerome and Holly into this mess. Montez, after finding his dog, reaches out to Bill and asks for help. He believes that Brady is involved and describes how he tried to hurt him. The exact Latin phrase that he had spoken to Brady in the hospital is written in his dog's blood on the porch. It's the acknowledgement that Brady is involved, and there's credence to Bill's claims. It's a fine episode, but again, there are elements that feel very wheel-spinning. Everything with Lou, for instance, they don't really bear much impact on the plot and kind of suck the wind out of the sails of the show. But I'm still very excited to see what happens in the second half of this season. All right, everyone. So that's all that I have for this episode. But don't worry, we're going to continue to stay in the world of Mr. Mercedes and hang out with Brendan Gleason and the gang next week once we get into the second half of the second season. Then we'll move on to the third season after that. So if you have any thoughts on anything that I have said today, including my overall thoughts on Mr. Mercedes as a franchise, on Brendan Gleason's depiction of Bill Hodges, on anything, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. Feel free to head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/stephenkingcast for a lot more content, including reviews of non-Stephen King books, non-Stephen King movies, television shows that are currently airing. So if you like Star Wars or Godzilla or Batman or Daredevil or the MCU or Dean Koontz or Backrooms or Obsession, any of those, please head on over to Patreon because there's a lot of fun and a lot of good stuff happening over there. So thank you, everyone, and may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.